The first light of dawn cut through the Pacific Northwest mist as 282 Navy SEALs formed perfect rows on the training grounds of Fort Blackstone. Their boots struck concrete in synchronized rhythm, each movement precise as clockwork, each breath measured and controlled. Among them stood Sergeant Leah Cross, her utility uniform crisp but unremarkable, bearing no visible decorations or insignia that would distinguish her from any other soldier in the formation. The morning air carried the sharp scent of pine from the surrounding forest and the distant sound of waves against the rocky coastline. Leah's dark eyes remained fixed straight ahead, her posture ramrod straight as she had been trained since her first day in basic training years ago. Around her, conversations buzzed in low tones between the assembled warriors, discussions of weekend plans and upcoming deployments mixing with technical talk about equipment modifications and tactical innovations. From 3 rows back, Corporal Riker's voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade through silk. His words carried just loud enough for the surrounding soldiers to hear, but not quite loud enough to constitute a formal disruption of military protocol. He questioned aloud why support staff seemed to be mixed in with real warriors during what was supposed to be elite SEAL training. His tone suggested amusement rather than genuine curiosity, as if he had stumbled upon some administrative error that needed correcting. Leia's breathing remained steady and controlled, her gaze never wavering from the front of the formation where Master Chief Rowan would soon appear to conduct the morning briefing. She had learned long ago that the best response to ignorance was often silence, that allowing others to reveal their assumptions provided more information than any verbal sparring ever could. The soldiers around her shifted slightly, some glancing in her direction with curious expressions, while others maintained their focus on proper military bearing. I want to pause here and ask all of you watching, where are you tuning in from today? Are you watching from a military town where you understand these dynamics? Or maybe from somewhere completely different where this kind of workplace tension feels familiar in your own environment? Drop a comment and let me know your location, because I think this story hits differently depending on where you have experienced power dynamics like these. The formation stretched across the entire width of the training yard, boots polished to mirror shine, reflecting the growing daylight. Each SEAL represented months or years of grueling training, selection processes that broke 90% of candidates before completion, and combat experience that had been earned through blood and sacrifice in theaters of war around the globe. They were among the most elite warriors in the American military, handpicked for their physical capabilities, mental toughness, and unwavering commitment to mission success. Riker continued his commentary, suggesting that perhaps the morning roster had been confused or that someone in administration had made an error in assignment. His words carried the casual confidence of a soldier who had never questioned his own place in the hierarchy, who assumed that his presence among these elite warriors was both natural and permanent. Other soldiers began to take notice of the brewing tension, though military protocol demanded they maintain their positions and bearing regardless of interpersonal conflicts developing within the formation. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the training ground and illuminating the serious faces of men and women who had dedicated their lives to serving their country in the most dangerous missions imaginable. Master Chief Rowan emerged from the command building, his presence immediately commanding attention and silence from the entire formation. His weathered face bore the scars of decades of combat operations, and his eyes held the kind of wisdom that could only be earned through leading warriors in life and death situations. As the Master Chief approached the front of the formation, his voice carried across the training yard with the authority of absolute command. He began the standard morning briefing, outlining training objectives for the day and reviewing safety protocols that would govern their exercises. His words were crisp and professional, delivered with the kind of precision that left no room for misinterpretation or confusion. Behind him, Leah maintained her position with the same quiet professionalism she had demonstrated every day since arriving at Fort Blackstone. Her record showed exemplary service, though the details of her previous assignments remained largely classified and unavailable to most personnel. She had requested no special treatment, asked for no accommodations, and demonstrated nothing but complete competence in every task assigned to her. The formation listened intently as Master Chief Rowan detailed the morning training schedule, which would include marksmanship drills, tactical movement exercises, and close-quarters combat scenarios. Each evolution was designed to maintain the razor-sharp edge that separated SEALs from other military units, ensuring that skills remained fresh and reactions stayed lightning-fast even during routine training periods. Riker's comments had not gone entirely unnoticed, though the Master Chief's presence had temporarily silenced any further disruption. The tension remained visible in the slight stiffness of nearby soldiers, and the way conversations had shifted from casual morning discussion to more focused attention on proper military bearing. Some warriors glanced toward Leia with new curiosity, wondering what had prompted Riker's pointed observations about her presence in their formation. The briefing concluded with assignments for specialized training groups, each SEAL receiving specific instructions for their role in the day's exercises. As the formation began to move toward their respective training areas, the careful order that had characterized the morning assembly started to give way to the more dynamic energy of active preparation for combat exercises. The training exercises began with the practiced efficiency that characterized every SEAL operation, each warrior moving to their assigned positions with the fluid coordination that came from countless hours of repetition and refinement. Leia found herself assigned to the marksmanship rotation, where she would demonstrate her proficiency with the standard issue weapons that formed the backbone of special operations combat effectiveness. Her movements were economical and precise as she checked her gear and prepared for the morning's first evolution. Riker positioned himself at the adjacent firing lane, his comments now taking on a more pointed edge as he questioned whether certain personnel truly belonged among warriors who had earned their place through blood and sacrifice. His voice carried far enough to reach the other soldiers in their group, creating an audience for what was becoming less of casual observation and more of deliberate public commentary. He wondered aloud whether administrative errors might have placed support staff in positions meant for combat veterans, suggesting that perhaps some review of qualifications was needed. The other SEALs in their rotation exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their growing discomfort with the situation developing before them. These were men who had served in the most dangerous corners of the world, who understood better than most the importance of unit cohesion and mutual respect among teammates who might need to depend on each other for survival. Yet military protocol demanded they maintain their focus on the training at hand rather than intervene in what appeared to be interpersonal conflict between fellow soldiers. Leia's responses remained measured and professional, each word carefully chosen to maintain military courtesy while avoiding any escalation that might disrupt the training environment. When questioned about her qualifications, she provided only the minimum information required, citing her service record number and current assignment without elaborating on the classified details that would have immediately silenced all criticism. Her calm demeanor seemed to frustrate Riker further, as if her refusal to be baited into an emotional response somehow invalidated his attempts to establish dominance. Master Chief Rowan observed the developing situation from his position overseeing the training rotation, his experienced eye recognizing the signs of brewing conflict even as both parties maintained the appearance of professional conduct. He had seen similar scenarios play out countless times during his decades of service, situations where personalities clashed and egos competed for recognition within the tight confines of military hierarchy. His weathered face remained expressionless as he monitored the exchange, ready to intervene if necessary, but allowing the situation to develop within acceptable boundaries. The marksmanship exercise proceeded according to standard protocol, each SEAL taking their position at the firing line and engaging targets at various distances with different weapon systems. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed across the training range as warriors demonstrated the precision shooting that formed such a critical component of their operational effectiveness. Brass casings scattered across the concrete as magazines were emptied and reloaded with the mechanical efficiency that came from thousands of hours of practice. Riker's commentary shifted from questions about administrative assignments to more personal observations about the standards expected of real warriors versus those who might be playing at being soldiers. He suggested that some individuals might be more comfortable in support roles where their contributions would be more appropriate to their actual capabilities. His words were carefully chosen to remain within the bounds of acceptable military discourse, while making his meaning unmistakably clear to everyone within hearing range. The tension in the group became palpable as other SEALs found themselves caught between their training to maintain unit cohesion and their growing recognition that one of their number was systematically attempting to humiliate a fellow warrior. Some shifted uncomfortably as they realized they were being positioned as unwilling audience to what was becoming a very public challenge to someone's right to serve among elite forces. The situation was developing beyond normal military rivalry into something more pointed and potentially destructive. Leia continued her training with the same quiet competence she had demonstrated since arriving at Fort Blackstone. Her performance at each station meeting were exceeding the standards expected of SEAL personnel. Her shooting was precise and controlled, her weapon handling smooth and professional, her tactical movement economical and effective. Yet none of these demonstrations seemed to satisfy Riker's apparent need to establish some form of superiority over her presence in the unit. As the morning progressed, Riker's observations became increasingly focused on the concept of earned versus assigned positions, suggesting that some individuals might have achieved their current status through administrative oversight rather than demonstrated competence in combat situations. He referenced the importance of maintaining standards that had been established through the sacrifice of previous generations of warriors, implying that dilution of those standards represented a disservice to those who had paid the ultimate price for the privileges they now enjoyed. The other SEALs in the rotation found themselves in the uncomfortable position of watching their training environment become charged with personal animosity while being unable to directly address the situation without potentially making it worse. They maintained their focus on the prescribed exercises while remaining aware that something significant was building toward what might become an inevitable confrontation between two members of their elite community. Master Chief Rowan's attention became more focused on the developing situation as Riker's comments grew more pointed and personal, crossing from professional critique into territory that approached harassment of a fellow service member. His decades of experience managing warrior personalities told him that intervention might soon become necessary, though his preference was always to allow soldiers to resolve their own conflicts when possible rather than impose external authority on situations that might be better handled through peer resolution. The morning sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows across the training ground as the exercises continued with mechanical precision despite the growing tension within one particular group. The sound of gunfire and shouted commands filled the air as hundreds of elite warriors honed their skills, most unaware of the drama playing out in their midst as two very different approaches to military service prepared for what was becoming an inevitable collision. The training rotation shifted to close-quarters combat drills, providing a natural pause in the morning's activities as equipment was repositioned and new safety protocols were established for hand-to-hand combat exercises. During this brief interlude, the careful structure that had governed the morning's activities relaxed slightly, allowing for more informal interaction among the warriors as they prepared for the next phase of their training. It was during this transitional moment that Riker saw his opportunity to escalate his campaign of public humiliation beyond verbal commentary into something more direct and unmistakably confrontational. The assembled SEALs formed a loose circle around the designated combat training area, their attention focused on Master Chief Rowan as he explained the parameters for the upcoming exercises. The morning sun had burned away most of the coastal mist, leaving the training ground bathed in clear Pacific Northwest light that made every detail sharp and visible. In this environment, with nearly 300 elite warriors as potential witnesses, Riker chose to make his challenge as public and humiliating as possible. His voice rose to carry across the entire training area as he addressed Leia directly for the first time that morning, abandoning any pretense of casual observation in favor of open confrontation. He declared that it was time for certain individuals to acknowledge the reality of their situation and recognize the difference between real warriors who had earned their place through combat and those who might be present due to administrative convenience or political correctness rather than demonstrated competence in life and death situations. The effect of his words was immediate and electric. Conversations stopped abruptly as 282 pairs of eyes turned toward the source of the disturbance, their trained instincts recognizing that something significant was developing beyond the normal bounds of military rivalry or competitive banter. These were warriors who had learned to read tension and conflict as survival skills, and every one of them understood that the situation had just escalated beyond anything that could be dismissed as normal interpersonal friction. Riker stepped forward, his movements deliberate and calculated to maximize the dramatic impact of his challenge. He positioned himself directly in front of Leia, close enough that his words would be unmistakably clear to every witness, while maintaining just enough distance to avoid immediate physical contact. His posture radiated aggressive confidence as he demanded that she acknowledge him as a superior soldier, a real warrior who had earned his place through sacrifice and proven competence rather than whatever circumstances had brought her to this training ground. The silence that followed his challenge was profound and weighted with implications that every witness understood instinctively. In the rigid hierarchy of military culture, such a direct challenge represented a fundamental breach of protocol that demanded immediate resolution one way or another. There was no possibility of ignoring or deflecting what had just occurred, no way to pretend that normal military courtesy could restore the equilibrium that had just been shattered by Riker's deliberate escalation. Master Chief Rowan's expression remained carefully neutral as he observed the developing confrontation, his decades of experience telling him that intervention at this moment might only postpone an inevitable resolution that needed to happen between the two principals. His weathered hands remained loose at his sides, ready to act if necessary, but allowing the situation to develop according to its own momentum. Around the training circle, other SEALs shifted slightly, their bodies unconsciously preparing for potential violence, while their minds processed the implications of what they were witnessing. Riker's demands became more specific and humiliating as he commanded Leia to kneel before him as a gesture of respect and acknowledgement of his superior status as a real soldier. His words were chosen deliberately to maximize shame and submission, designed to force her into a position that would establish his dominance in front of the largest possible audience. He suggested that such a gesture would be appropriate recognition of the difference between those who belonged among elite warriors and those who were merely occupying space that rightfully belonged to others. The demand for physical submission crossed a line that every witness recognized immediately. This was no longer about military hierarchy or professional competence, but about personal humiliation and the exercise of power for its own sake. The assembled SEALs found themselves unwilling participants in what had become a very public attempt to destroy someone's dignity and standing within their elite community, a spectacle that violated every principle of mutual respect that bound warriors together in brotherhood. Leia's response came in a voice that carried clearly across the training ground despite its measured tone and controlled volume. She informed Riker calmly and directly that he was making a serious mistake, that his current course of action would have consequences he had not considered, and that he still had an opportunity to reconsider his approach before the situation progressed beyond any possibility of graceful resolution. Her words carried no threat or bluster, only the quiet certainty of someone who understood exactly what was happening and what would follow inevitably from the choices being made. The warning in her voice was subtle but unmistakable to anyone with enough experience to recognize it. Several of the older SEALs exchanged glances that reflected their growing sense that there were elements to this confrontation that remained hidden beneath the surface, that perhaps Riker's assumptions about his opponent might be fundamentally flawed in ways that would soon become apparent to everyone present. Riker's reaction to her calm refusal was immediate and explosive, his face flushed with rage at being defied in front of nearly 300 witnesses, his ego unable to accept that his demand for submission had been met with quiet resistance rather than immediate compliance. He stepped closer, his body language shifting from calculated intimidation to barely controlled fury as he realized that his attempt at public humiliation had been turned back on him by someone who refused to be cowed by his display of aggressive dominance. The assembled SEALs could feel the tension reaching a breaking point as Riker's anger built toward what was becoming an inevitable physical confrontation. His breathing became heavier and more irregular as his self-control slipped away, replaced by the kind of rage that often preceded violence between warriors whose pride had been wounded beyond their ability to contain their responses through discipline and training alone. The explosion of violence came without further warning as Riker's rage finally overwhelmed his military training and professional restraint. His right boot connected with devastating force behind Leia's knees, a brutal kick designed to drop her to the concrete in the most humiliating manner possible before the assembled formation of 282 elite warriors. The impact sent shock waves through her legs as she fell forward, her hands breaking her fall against the unforgiving surface of the training ground, while Riker's triumphant laughter echoed across the suddenly silent yard. The physical assault crossed every line of military protocol and professional conduct, transforming what had been verbal harassment into criminal battery witnessed by hundreds of fellow service members. The sound of the impact carried clearly through the morning air, followed immediately by a silence so profound that it seemed to drain all sound from the world around them. Even the distant crash of Pacific waves seemed muted as every SEAL present processed what they had just witnessed, their trained minds struggling to comprehend that one of their own had just committed such a fundamental violation of everything they stood for as warriors and brothers. Leia remained on her hands and knees for several heartbeats, her breathing controlled and steady despite the shock of the unexpected attack. When she lifted her head, her dark eyes held an expression that several of the older SEALs recognized immediately, though they could not quite place where they had seen that particular look before. It was the calm, measuring gaze of a predator that had just been given permission to abandon all restraint, the focused intensity of someone who had spent years learning to turn violence into an art form requiring surgical precision and devastating effectiveness. Her voice cut through the silence with crystalline clarity as she delivered a warning that carried to every corner of the training ground. She informed Riker that he had exactly 3 seconds to apologize for his assault and withdraw his demands, that this was his final opportunity to avoid consequences that would extend far beyond anything he could currently imagine. Her tone remained perfectly level and professional, but underneath the measured words lay something that made the hair on the back of experienced warriors' necks stand up in instinctive recognition of mortal danger. Riker's response was everything she had expected and nothing she had hoped for. His mocking laughter grew louder as he positioned himself over her kneeling form, his body language radiating the confidence of someone who believed he had just established his dominance through superior force and intimidation. He suggested that perhaps this was exactly the position she belonged in, that maybe now she would understand her proper place in relation to real warriors who had earned their status through blood and sacrifice rather than administrative convenience or political correctness. The countdown began in her mind with the mechanical precision of a nuclear weapons timer, each second measured against his continued mockery and preparation for further humiliation. 3 seconds to recognize his error and choose a different path. 3 seconds to demonstrate some shred of honor or basic human decency. 3 seconds to avoid triggering a response that had been honed through years of classified training in environments where hesitation meant death and mercy was a luxury that could cost entire missions their chance of success. 2 seconds elapsed as Riker reached down toward her, his intentions clear to every witness as he prepared to physically force her into an even more degrading position. His hands moved with the casual confidence of someone who had never encountered serious resistance, who had always relied on size and aggression to overwhelm opponents who lacked the training or will to fight back effectively. Around the training circle, some SEALs began to shift forward, their own sense of brotherhood finally overcoming their reluctance to intervene in what had become a clearly one-sided assault. 1 second remained as his fingers brushed against her shoulder, his grip beginning to tighten with the intention of forcing her face down against the concrete. The moment stretched like a guitar string under tension, pregnant with possibilities and weighted with the accumulated expertise of someone who had spent years learning to end conflicts with maximum efficiency and minimum wasted motion. Every muscle in her body coiled with potential energy, ready to release years of specialized training in a display of combat effectiveness that would shock even these elite warriors. The explosion of movement that followed was almost too fast for the human eye to track completely. Leia's body uncoiled like a striking serpent, her left hand shooting upward to trap Riker's descending arm, while her right elbow drove backward into his solar plexus with the kind of precision that could only come from thousands of hours of practice against live opponents. The impact doubled him over instantly, forcing all air from his lungs while simultaneously setting up the devastating sequence that would follow with mathematical inevitability. Her pivot was textbook perfect, a movement so fluid and economical that it appeared almost effortless despite the tremendous forces involved. As Riker gasped for breath and tried to process what had just happened to him, Leia's hands found the pressure points along his trapped arm with the kind of anatomical knowledge that spoke to extensive medical training combined with years of practical application in life and death situations. The nerve clusters she targeted sent electric shock waves through his entire nervous system, temporarily paralyzing his ability to coordinate any effective response. The first leg break came as she drove her knee upward into his right thigh, while simultaneously applying torque to his trapped arm, creating a lever system that focused all of the kinetic energy into the femur just above his kneecap. The sound of bone snapping echoed across the training ground like a gunshot, followed immediately by Riker's scream of agony as he realized that his leg could no longer support his weight. The assembled SEALs watched in stunned amazement as someone they had assumed was defenseless demonstrated the kind of bone-breaking technique that required years of specialized training to master. The second break followed with the same surgical precision, her movements flowing seamlessly from one devastating technique to the next without pause or hesitation. As Riker collapsed toward his damaged right leg, Leia guided his fall, while simultaneously applying a heel kick to his left shin that shattered the bone with a crack that seemed to reverberate through the bones of every witness. The technique was so perfectly executed that it appeared almost graceful, a ballet of violence performed with the kind of technical mastery that transformed brutality into something approaching art. Riker's collapse to the concrete was complete and final, both legs now useless appendages that could no longer support his weight or allow any possibility of continued aggression. His screams of pain and shock echoed across Fort Blackstone as the reality of his situation penetrated through the adrenaline and rage that had driven him to this moment. The man who had demanded submission now lay helpless and broken, entirely dependent on the mercy of someone whose capabilities he had fundamentally misunderstood. The entire formation of 282 Navy SEALs stood in absolute silence, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. These were warriors who had seen combat in the most dangerous corners of the world, men who understood violence and its application better than almost anyone on Earth. Yet the display of technical expertise they had just observed transcended anything in their experience, representing a level of training and capability that belonged to legends rather than the routine reality of military service. Master Chief Rowan's weathered face reflected the shock and recognition that was beginning to spread through the assembled warriors as they realized they had just witnessed something extraordinary. His decades of experience with special operations personnel told him that what he had just seen was not the result of standard military training, but rather the product of something far more specialized and deadly than anything taught in conventional schools. The techniques Leia had demonstrated belonged to a different world entirely, one where violence was refined to levels of precision that most soldiers would never encounter. Master Chief Rowan approached the scene with the measured steps of a leader who had witnessed countless acts of violence throughout his distinguished career, yet even his weathered features betrayed signs of shock at the surgical precision he had just observed. His trained eye swept over Riker's broken form sprawled across the concrete, noting the specific angles of the fractures and the technical expertise required to inflict such devastating damage with such apparent ease. Around the training circle, 282 elite warriors remained frozen in stunned silence, their minds still processing what they had witnessed from someone they had assumed was just another routine addition to their formation. The call for medical assistance echoed across Fort Blackstone as several SEALs moved to provide emergency aid to Riker, whose screams had subsided into whimpering moans of agony and disbelief. Combat medics began their rapid assessment of his injuries while maintaining careful distance from Leia, whose calm demeanor in the aftermath of such violence suggested capabilities that none of them were prepared to underestimate. Her breathing remained steady and controlled, showing no signs of the adrenaline rush that would be expected from someone who had just engaged in life-threatening combat. As Leia straightened her uniform and began to step back from the scene, the movement caused her sleeve to shift slightly, revealing a portion of her left forearm that had been concealed during the morning's activities. Master Chief Rowan's sharp eyes caught sight of what appeared to be specialized inkwork partially visible beneath the standard issue fabric, markings that triggered immediate recognition in his mind despite their deliberately subtle design and strategic placement. His voice carried across the training ground with the authority of absolute command as he called for all personnel to maintain their positions and await further instructions. The formation responded instantly to his directive, their discipline overriding their curiosity and shock as they assumed the rigid bearing that characterized elite military units under direct supervision. Yet their eyes remained fixed on the developing situation, sensing that something far more significant than a simple training incident was unfolding before them. Master Chief Rowan approached Leia directly, his demeanor shifting from routine authority to something approaching reverence as he requested permission to examine the markings on her arm. His words were carefully chosen and respectful, reflecting a growing understanding that he was dealing with someone whose credentials might far exceed anything visible in her standard personnel file. When she nodded consent and rolled up her sleeve, the intricate tattoo that emerged into view caused an audible intake of breath from the senior enlisted leader. The insignia was unmistakable to anyone with sufficient clearance and experience to recognize it. A stylized dagger surrounded by 13 stars, rendered in black ink with subtle red accents that could only be seen clearly in direct sunlight. Below the primary design, a series of small marks indicated successful completion of missions that most military personnel would never know existed, operations conducted in the deepest shadows where conventional rules of engagement gave way to necessities that could never be officially acknowledged. Master Chief Rowan's voice carried a note of genuine awe as he addressed the formation, explaining that they had just witnessed a demonstration by a member of SEAL Black Squadron, the most classified and elite unit within the special operations community. His words transformed the morning's events from a simple case of workplace violence into something approaching a historical moment, as the assembled warriors realized they had been present for a display of capabilities that existed at the very apex of military training and operational effectiveness. The explanation that followed provided context that reframed everything they had observed. Black Squadron operated in environments where traditional military protocols were inadequate, where missions required individuals capable of functioning independently in situations where failure meant not just personal death, but potential catastrophe on a global scale. Selection for such units involved testing that pushed candidates beyond the breaking point of normal human endurance, both physical and psychological, weeding out all but the most exceptional individuals. Leia's presence among regular SEAL units was revealed to be part of a deliberate cover assignment, a method used by classified units to provide their operators with routine military experience while maintaining the appearance of normal career progression. Her service record, properly understood, included multiple deployments to locations that did not officially exist, participation in operations that would never appear in any public accounting of American military activities, and training in techniques that pushed the boundaries of what was considered humanly possible. The formation began to comprehend that the quiet professional they had known as Sergeant Cross was actually someone whose real rank and accomplishments were so far above their own experience that comparison became meaningless. The combat techniques they had just witnessed represented years of specialized training in environments where mistakes meant death, and excellence was the minimum standard for survival. Her restraint during Riker's verbal harassment now appeared not as weakness, but as the kind of discipline that separated true professionals from mere practitioners of violence. Several of the older SEALs exchanged glances of recognition as pieces of military legend began to align with the reality standing before them. Stories circulated in special operations communities about ghost operatives who appeared and disappeared without trace, completing missions that officially never happened while maintaining covers so deep that even their fellow warriors remained unaware of their true capabilities. Such individuals were spoken of in hushed tones, their existence acknowledged only through implications and suggestions rather than direct confirmation. The medical team's arrival provided a stark contrast between Riker's continuing agony and Leia's composed bearing as she answered Master Chief Rowan's respectful questions about her operational background. Her responses were necessarily brief due to classification restrictions, but even the limited information she could provide painted a picture of service that transcended normal military experience. References to operations in territories that appeared on no maps, training with instructors whose names were themselves classified, and survival in environments that would have killed ordinary soldiers within hours. Riker's earlier demands for submission now appeared not just inappropriate, but almost comically misguided, as if a weekend warrior had challenged a professional athlete or an amateur painter had criticized the work of a master artist. His assumption that he represented some standard of military excellence against which others should be measured had been shattered along with his legs, revealing the vast gap between his perception of his own capabilities and the reality of what true elite performance actually required. The revelation spread through the formation like electricity as SEALs processed the understanding that they had shared training space with someone whose achievements placed her in the realm of military mythology. The techniques they had witnessed were not aberrations or lucky strikes, but rather the carefully controlled application of skills honed through experiences that few humans would ever survive, much less master to such a level of devastating effectiveness. Master Chief Rowan's respect was evident in every word and gesture as he ensured that appropriate medical attention was provided to Riker, while simultaneously making clear that any investigation of the incident would take into account the full context of what had occurred. The formation understood implicitly that they had witnessed justice rather than mere violence, the inevitable consequence of mistaking restraint for weakness and humility for incompetence in someone whose true capabilities existed far beyond normal human experience. The moment that followed Master Chief Rowan's revelation carried a weight that transcended the usual protocols of military hierarchy and discipline. 282 elite warriors stood at the edge of understanding something profound about the nature of true service and the difference between recognition and accomplishment, between public acknowledgement and private excellence. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training ground as these hardened professionals grappled with the realization that they had shared space with someone whose achievements placed her in a category they had previously believed existed only in legend. Master Chief Rowan's command voice carried across the training yard with crystal clarity as he called the entire formation to attention. The response was immediate and precise, every SEAL snapping to perfect military bearing despite their shock and confusion about the morning's extraordinary events. Their movements synchronized with the kind of precision that came from years of training, yet underneath their disciplined exterior lay a growing awareness that they were about to participate in something unprecedented in their collective experience. The order to present arms echoed across Fort Blackstone with the authority of decades of military tradition, yet the salute that followed carried significance that went far beyond routine ceremony. 282 hands rose in perfect unison, a sea of respect directed towards someone whose true rank and accomplishments had been hidden beneath the humble exterior of a fellow warrior who had chosen service over recognition, duty over acclaim, and professional excellence over personal advancement. Leia's response to this unprecedented display of respect reflected the same quiet dignity that had characterized every moment of her service among them. Her return salute was crisp and professional, executed with the kind of precision that spoke to years of military bearing and deep understanding of what such recognition truly meant. Yet her expression remained humble, suggesting that for her this moment represented not vindication or triumph, but simply the natural consequence of choices made long ago in service to ideals larger than personal ambition or desire for recognition. The formation held their salute for several long moments, allowing the weight of recognition to settle over the training ground like morning mist from the Pacific. These were warriors who understood sacrifice and dedication at levels most civilians would never comprehend. Yet even they found themselves awed by the realization that true excellence often wore the most humble disguise. The contrast between Riker's desperate need for acknowledgement and Leia's quiet competence had been rendered stark and unmistakable through the morning's events. Master Chief Rowan's words carried across the training yard as he addressed both the formation and the woman who had just demonstrated capabilities that transcended their previous understanding of human potential. His explanation of operational security requirements reminded every witness that what they had learned this morning was privileged information, that Leia's true background and capabilities represented state secrets that required the same level of protection as any classified operation they might encounter during their own service. The medical evacuation of Riker proceeded with professional efficiency, while the formation maintained their positions, his removal from the training ground serving as a stark reminder of the consequences that followed when arrogance and ignorance confronted competence and restraint. His injuries would heal with time and proper medical attention, but the lesson learned by every witness would resonate throughout their careers, shaping their understanding of what true professionalism required and what happened when basic respect was abandoned in favor of bullying and intimidation. As the immediate crisis passed and normal training routines began to reassert themselves, Master Chief Rowan approached Leia with the kind of respectful inquiry that acknowledged her actual status rather than her cover assignment. His questions about her preferences for continued service reflected genuine concern for someone whose contributions to national security had clearly been extraordinary, yet whose choice to remain in routine assignments suggested priorities that placed mission accomplishment above personal advancement or recognition. Leia's response revealed the character that had enabled her survival and success in environments where lesser individuals would have perished within hours. She expressed her preference for continued service among regular SEAL units, citing the value of maintaining connections to the broader military community and the importance of understanding how elite capabilities could best support conventional operations. Her humility in the face of genuine reverence from fellow warriors spoke to the kind of inner strength that separated true professionals from those who sought validation through displays of authority or power. The offer of reassignment to positions more commensurate with her actual rank and accomplishments was declined with the same quiet grace that had characterized her response to Riker's earlier harassment. Her explanation that service itself was its own reward, that the mission mattered more than recognition, and that her current assignment provided opportunities to contribute in ways that suited her particular skills and experience reflected a maturity of perspective that impressed even the most senior personnel present. Now I want to ask all of you who have been following this incredible story, what are your thoughts about the quiet heroes and professionals around us who choose service over recognition? Have you encountered people in your own life who demonstrate this kind of humble excellence, whether in the military, in your workplace, or in your community? People whose true capabilities only become apparent when circumstances demand it. Share your thoughts in the comments, because I think we all know someone who embodies this kind of quiet strength and dedication to something larger than themselves. The training day resumed with a fundamentally altered dynamic as the formation processed the morning's lessons about assumptions, respect, and the difference between appearance and reality. Every SEAL present had been reminded that excellence often disguised itself as ordinary competence, that true professionals rarely needed to announce their capabilities, and that the most dangerous individuals were often those who appeared least threatening to casual observation. Master Chief Rowan's final briefing emphasized the importance of maintaining operational security regarding everything they had witnessed, while simultaneously acknowledging that they had been privileged to observe something extraordinary. His words reinforced the understanding that Leia's presence among them represented not an anomaly, but rather the kind of deep professionalism that characterized the very best of military service, where personal recognition mattered far less than mission accomplishment and unit effectiveness. The return to routine training exercises proceeded with heightened awareness and renewed respect for the unpredictable nature of the warriors who served alongside them. Every SEAL present had been reminded that competence and capability could not be measured through superficial observation, that true strength often manifested as restraint rather than aggression, and that the most elite individuals were often those who chose humility over arrogance in their daily interactions with fellow service members. As the morning progressed toward midday, the events at Fort Blackstone became part of the informal oral history that bound elite military units together across generations. The story of the quiet sergeant who had demonstrated capabilities that transcended normal human experience would be told and retold wherever warriors gathered, serving as both cautionary tale about the dangers of assumptions and inspiring example of what true professionalism actually required.